So, the ending of chapter 25 of Two Blue Vortex left us with a cliffhanger where Boruto was making a deal with the devil, and that devil is Momoshiki. Now, this deal from Boruto stated that if Momoshiki lent Boruto his power in the battle against Jura and Jura was defeated, that Boruto would hand over his body to Momoshiki. And considering how much time and effort Boruto has dedicated to keeping Momoshiki under wraps, this came as a little bit of a surprise. Now, I don't 100% believe that Boruto is planning on handing over his body to Momoshiki. However, in the hypothetical circumstance where Boruto does hand over his body to Momoshiki, the first chapter of Boruto starts to make a whole lot more sense. See, because say what you will about Kawaki and wag your fist at him as much as you'd like, the idea of Kawaki destroying all of Konoha has never made anything even remotely close to sense to me. But the idea of Borushiki destroying Konoha? Yeah, that's an idea I can get behind. But if Borushiki is truly the one responsible for the destruction of Konoha, wouldn't Kawaki kind of be in the right for trying to get rid of Boruto? Wouldn't Kawaki kind of be fighting for the good of Konoha, trying to exercise this threat to the ninja world? Wouldn't Kawaki kind of be humanity's last and only chance against this monstrosity named Borushiki? But Nick, some of you say, Boruto doesn't seem to be under the control of Momoshiki in chapter 1 or episode 1, and you're right, he doesn't, which actually makes even more sense. See, this idea that Momoshiki is gonna gain control of Boruto's body has clicked a final puzzle piece into my brain. Like Isagi realizing he can kick the ball kind of hard in on a curve, the puzzle has completed in my mind. And I've realized that the destruction of Konoha won't come at the hands of Jura or Kawaki, but rather Boruto, making Kawaki's vendetta against Boruto all the more valid. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're demonizing RMC because in today's video we're talking Boruto will destroy Konoha. But before we get to talking about the third destruction of Konoha, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for an additional NC Hammer 23 video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We are still in the Forest of Death. There's a lot of hidden rain ninja that need taken care of. Before we get into all that, today I want to talk to you about a brand new sponsor to the page, Vessi. August is all about transitions. Wrapping up summer travels, getting back into your work habits, and making the most out of every single one of your everyday adventures. And Vessi wants to ensure that not only the end of your summer wraps up perfectly, but also they want to make sure that you only need one shoe to get you through any kind of adventure. See, whether it's navigating transit, walking commutes, or exploring local neighborhoods, Vessi's got you covered. See, Vessi makes shoes that are not only comfortable enough to be worn all day, but also fashionable enough to be worn to any occasion. And more than that, completely waterproof. Yes, you heard me right. All the Vessi shoes are completely waterproof, which means no more planning your outfits around the weather. But don't worry, the shoes are still incredibly lightweight and breathable, with very easy slip-on, slip-off heels for guaranteed all-day comfort. Now, this is all made possible with their patented Dymatex technology that's built with their eco-conscious construction with vegan and PFAS-free materials. But if all of that isn't enough to convince you that these are the best shoes on the market, Vessi shoppers also get a 1-year warranty on their shoes and are offered worry-free 30-day returns and exchanges. On top of that, all orders over $110 that are heading to North America get free shipping. So what are you waiting for? Get 15% off your first order of Vessis by using the link in my description, and make every step count with the waterproof ultra lightweight Pacifics with a 1-year warranty and worry-free 30-day returns and exchanges. That way you're covered for every journey. Discover more at vessi.com/nchammer to get 15% off your first pair today. See, I'm gonna be entirely honest with you. The idea that Momoshiki was gonna take over Boruto's body up until this moment didn't sit right with me. There seems to be a ton of other avenues that Boruto could possibly explore to find enough power to defeat Jura. Whether that be training with Kawaki like Boruto trained with Sasuke before the Momoshiki fight, or just recruiting other fighters to help in the ensuing battle against Jura like Team 10 and Himawari to help tilt the scales towards the side of Konoha seem like more sound strategies to me. I mean, why unleash one incredibly dangerous world-devouring alien to defeat another? Like, cool, yeah, will Borushiki's power probably allow you to defeat Jura? 100%, but Momoshiki's still gonna want Jura around because Jura is the 10 tails and Momoshiki needs the 10 tails to feed Kawaki to create a divine tree to eat a chakra fruit to consume all of the chakra of Earth and possibly assume his original form back. And therefore this idea that Boruto somehow didn't put 2 and 2 together, that Momoshiki would need Jura for this equation, and therefore that Momoshiki would probably go back on his promise to kill Jura or maybe even help in the first place, seems unlikely. And therefore a couple of days ago we speculated that Boruto was planning one of 4 things. The first thing being the most straightforward thing, which is that that Boruto is lying. That either Boruto is going to channel into Momoshiki's power using the karma marking in the battle against Jura while still maintaining control of his body and defeat Jura, and then when Momoshiki says, okay, cool, do I get your body now? Boruto essentially goes, nope, and then keeps it moving because what does it matter to Boruto if Momoshiki begins to pout? Or possibly Boruto could unleash Borushiki in some capacity in the battle against Jura, giving Momoshiki his body temporarily. Then after Jura is defeated by the combined forces, Borushiki and Kawaki, Boruto could wrestle back control of his body from Momoshiki, saying, hey, I gave you control of my body, it was up to you to maintain it. The second possibility we talked about is that Boruto fully plans on giving his body over to Momoshiki, but believes that his friends like Sarada, Mitsuki, Kawaki, Konohamaru, and the rest of them will be able to kill him after Momoshiki takes over his body. That is to say that Boruto identifies Jura as a bigger threat than him as Borushiki. And considering the fact that Kawaki, who had barely begun to learn how to use his new karma marking, was able to flatline Boruto once before because Boruto was able to reseed control for a small moment and allow for Kawaki to punch him through the heart, maybe Boruto believes that after Jura is defeated that his duty to humanity is done and that Kawaki and the rest of his friends will be able to keep the world safe, not needing him. The third possibility we talked about is that Boruto prepped a clone. It's long been talked about that one of the most effective ways for Boruto to rid himself of Momoshiki would be to place a karma marking on somebody else. And while the manga has only ever talked about the possibility of Boruto placing a karma marking on Code, on account of the fact that it's A, Boruto fighting against Kawaki on top of the destroyed Hokage faces, and B, the fact that putting a karma marking on Code would be a wildly bad idea, the idea that Boruto places a karma marking on a clone made by somebody like Amado or Orochimaru seems substantially more likely and way safer. And the fourth and final possibility we talked about is that somehow, some way, Boruto and Momoshiki are able to have a Naruto and Kurama-esque bonding moment that allows them to realize that, hey, we're in this body together, we might as well be friends. Now that seems unlikely. Like, sure, Kurama was talked about as a demon who destroyed villages for fun, but Kurama was just kind of an entity of massive power that was abused by humanity for basically the entire time he was alive. Momoshiki, on the other hand, belongs to a genocidal race of aliens who's already consumed like a dozen planets. That would be a really weird friendship to have. That'd be like America befriending a country actively committing a genocide, or like, I don't know, like something silly like that. Now, all these possibilities do seem somewhat likely, but if I'm being real with you, I'm not in love with any of them. But one or two of them do begin to make a little bit more sense when you consider what's happening in Chapter 1. See, now that Boruto and Kawaki have begun to work together to stomp out the Shinju threat, it seems as though, somehow, some way, that a door has opened that may allow for Boruto and Kawaki to reconcile some of their differences. I mean, if Kawaki can see Boruto involved at the highest level of combat against Jura, without allowing for Momoshiki to take over his body, well then, hey, maybe Kawaki could come to the realization that Boruto's got this whole Otsutsuki thing kind of under wraps. However, we know from the events of Chapter 1 that Boruto and Kawaki do not reconcile their differences. On top of this, we also know that Konoha gets destroyed, and that seemingly in this battle between Kawaki and Boruto, that Boruto seems to be in charge of his body, but also in charge of the power of the karma and the Jokan. Now, when considering how Chapter 25 ends, all three of these are kind of wild realizations. This means that even if Boruto does hand over control of his body to Momoshiki, that at some point in the future, he gets control back. And on top of Boruto being in control of his body, he's also in control of the power of the karma marking, and he's in control of the power of the Jokan. And these are all very important pieces of information we should keep locked away. However, the fact that Boruto is in charge of his body and alive by the time that he's fighting against Kawaki means that the second theory, that Boruto trusts his friends to kill him when Momoshiki takes over his body, is null and void. And honestly, it was always kind of null and void. I don't really know why I added that one in the first place. Now, some of you might be saying, but Nick, there is obviously the possibility that this fight could take place immediately after Kawaki and Boruto defeat Jura, and therefore Boruto could be in the process of being taken over by Momoshiki. And like, yeah, that is a possibility. However, if that was a possibility and Boruto understood that Momoshiki was in the process of taking over his body, Boruto wouldn't be prepping for a fight against Kawaki. He would be trying to still his body so Kawaki could kill him. It's been established already that Boruto would rather die than live as Borushiki. I see no reason for that to change anytime soon. And thus another very important thing needs to be considered here when looking at the events of Chapter 1. Konoha is destroyed. And thus we need to ask ourselves the question, well, who currently would destroy Konoha? Well, like I said earlier in the video, I really don't believe it's Kawaki. Well, Chapter 1 tries to make it look like Kawaki was the person who destroyed Konoha, with the first line of Boruto being Boruto saying, I can't believe you would go this far, Kawaki. I really just can't imagine a world where for no good reason Kawaki levels Konoha. But if not Kawaki, then who? Jura? Well, maybe. I'm not gonna sit here and act like Jura's moratorium on not fighting within the confines of Konoha's never going to be lifted. And I'm also not gonna act like Jura can't just pop up in the center of Konoha really whenever he wants to. He has complete and total control of the Claw Grimes. Everybody in Konoha has been told to ignore him or treat him like a regular citizen. Jura could bring the fight to Konoha really whenever he wants to. However, considering the fact that Jura has designated Konoha as essentially a safe space, citing that he's so interested in its history and its architecture that he doesn't want it destroyed, and based on the fact that everybody within the confines of Konoha doesn't want to fight Jura inside of Konoha, as best demonstrated when Team 10 literally hopped on a painted bird and flew for miles to get outside of Konoha when they realized they were maybe gonna have to fight against Jura. And yeah, the possibility of either Jura or a battle against Jura being what destroys Konoha just feels unlikely to me. I mean, my god, the end of chapter 24 was Jura blushing about the fact that Kawaki complimented it. I don't see him shifting towards destroying Konoha anytime soon, which means there's really only one person who A, has the ability to destroy Konoha, and B, would like to destroy Konoha, and that person is Borushiki. See, Momoshiki could pop out of Boruto really whenever. After Boruto and Kawaki best Jura and defeat him, Boruto could seemingly regain control of his body. However, because of the promise he made to Momoshiki, Momoshiki may be able to pop out of Boruto really whenever he wants to. On top of this, Momoshiki is highly incentivized to destroy Konoha, because A, it would possibly destroy Boruto, something that Momoshiki's been trying to do for a long time to ensure that Boruto drowns in his sorrows and gives up his body to Momoshiki forever, and B, as an act of revenge against the likes of Sasuke and Naruto who defeated Momoshiki in the first place. On top of this, Boruto's line of "I didn't think you would go this far, Kawaki," makes a lot more sense when you consider that maybe, just maybe, Kawaki was battling against Borushiki before that moment. See, Kawaki destroying Konoha outright makes no sense. Kawaki loves Naruto, and while Kawaki really only has allegiance to Naruto, and while Kawaki said that he would be fine dying after he executed all of the Otsutsuki, I think Kawaki understands that Naruto wouldn't want Konoha destroyed. And while Kawaki is acting rather selfishly around his desires with Naruto, and while Kawaki probably understands that Naruto probably wouldn't want Boruto killed either, Boruto is an Otsutsuki threat. Konoha isn't. However, if hypothetically Kawaki was battling against the likes of Borushiki, I can absolutely see a world in which Kawaki does not care about the collateral damage that their battle is causing, even if that collateral damage is falling upon Konoha. There is nothing more important to Kawaki than defeating Borushiki and eliminating the last vestiges of the Otsutsuki threat on Earth. And if the price that Kawaki has to pay to accomplish that goal is the destruction of Konoha, I think he would gladly do it. So I do genuinely believe that chapter 25 of 2 Blue Vortex has changed the context of chapter 1 of part 1 of Boruto. I do believe that there is a fair to decent chance that Boruto does give up his body to Momoshiki. And while that power up from Boruto may result in the defeat of Jura, I believe even if Boruto is planning to try and reseed control of his body back from Momoshiki, he may not be able to. And thus Momoshiki, who's now in charge of Boruto's body, would begin his rampage across the world, most likely starting with Konoha. And this would explain why Boruto and Kawaki are already roughed up by the time that chapter 1 begins, either because of their pre-existing battle against Jura or because of their pre-existing battle against each other. It also would explain why Boruto's not wearing his headband. See, I understand that post-time skip Boruto doesn't wear his headband, but the symbolic act of Boruto putting on his headband before his battle against Kawaki, to me feels like a symbol that Boruto has returned to Konoha. That maybe, just maybe, the bad Boruto is gone. The Boruto cast out by omnipotence, the Boruto shunned for being part Momoshiki. Not to mention that Borushiki never wears his headband on his forehead. We've only ever seen Borushiki with his headband around his neck. And thus, once again, the symbolic nature of Boruto putting on his headband feels as though a way to separate him from Borushiki. But what does all of this mean? Does that mean that Borushiki destroys Konoha and then somehow, some way, Boruto recedes control? Yeah, kind of actually. See, I see the events of the first chapter coming to pass in one of two ways. Both of those ways start with Boruto giving over his body to Momoshiki. And after Boruto gives over his body to Momoshiki, Momoshiki goes and fights against Kawaki, and that ensuing battle destroys Konoha. And then sometime during that battle, one of two things happens. Either Boruto, while drowning inside of Borushiki, awakes to the power of the Jokan, and the Jokan gives Boruto the ability to control the power of Momoshiki, possibly against his will, and therefore reseed control of his body forever, allowing him the ability to use the Kama marking as we see in chapter 1, or during the battle between Borushiki and Kawaki, the clone of Boruto that was made by either Amado or Orochimaru reaches 100% expression of its Kama marking, and Boruto is able to join in the battle against Borushiki with Kawaki. Now, this would mean that the Boruto we see involved in the fight in the beginning of chapter 1 is not our original Boruto, but rather a clone that helped dispose of the old Boruto, the Borushiki Boruto.
But Nick, how would this Boruto ever Jokan and a comma marking?
Well, like we said, remember this new Boruto is coming to life because old Boruto placed a comma marking on him, a comma marking that would have all of Boruto's genetics and memories and powers. And therefore, if this new Boruto wanted to be able to tap into the powers of the old Boruto, he'd have to activate his comma marking, and this comma marking would now be devoid of Momoshiki. But Nick, how would he have the Jokan? He's a clone. He probably should have the Jokan. Not to mention that undergoing karmic rebirth actually powers up a lot of Otsutsuki's, as it was said that Shibai was able to achieve enlightenment by consuming hundreds of chakra fruits and undergoing karmic reincarnation multiple times. So maybe the true trick to Boruto being able to crack the code on his Jokan was karmic reincarnation. However, in either of these scenarios, Kawaki would be faced with a version of Boruto that he wouldn't have a really good reason to trust. Either Boruto would be telling him, hey listen, I know what Borushiki just did was really bad, but trust me, I have Momoshiki on a leash now forever, or a new version of Boruto that has access to a comma marking like the old version of Boruto would show up and try to tell Ishiki, hey listen, this comma marking isn't tied to Momoshiki, like how your comma marking isn't tied to Ishiki. But in either of the scenarios, Kawaki would be very justified to not believe Boruto. See, this is what I believe that Ikimoto is trying to build up towards. Right now, Kawaki is somewhat justified in his desire to kill Boruto. Boruto does have Momoshiki under wraps, and we know that Momoshiki just wants to die. Boruto also does have to fight back the comma marking every time somebody activates theirs in front of him. And therefore, there is the possibility that at some point in the future, Borushiki does come out to play. And as the Otsutsuki threat is really the only thing that could possibly end up killing Naruto, Kawaki, who just wants to make a safe world for Naruto to live in, is somewhat justified in his hatred of Boruto, who is therefore an extension of the Otsutsuki. Now, is this 100% justified? No, not really. Kawaki's being kind of unjust. However, if Momoshiki does take over Boruto's body and Borushiki destroys Konoha, Kawaki becomes more justified in his desire to kill Boruto. However, if we know, because either Boruto is a clone or because the Jokan allows for Boruto to control Momoshiki's power, that Momoshiki is in check, then Boruto is also justified for fighting for his life. And thus, this battle between Kawaki and Boruto becomes infinitely more interesting. There's not necessarily a bad guy. There's not necessarily a right choice. It's a clashing of two ideals, a clashing between two brothers, and who's ever more powerful comes out on top. And that is infinitely more interesting than the clash between Sasuke and Naruto at the end of their story. See, because Naruto was in the right. Naruto had always been in the right. Sasuke wanted to become Hokage. He wanted to kill Naruto so he could sever his connection to the world. But Sasuke wanted to lead Konoha with an iron fist, kind of like how Madara wanted to control Konoha with an iron fist. Sasuke was simply following in the footsteps of Madara, following in the footsteps of really every Indra reincarnation ever. And thus, in a tale as old as time, the Asura reincarnation was the one who was morally justifiable. However, both Kawaki and Boruto, at least in their own worldviews, because obviously Kawaki wouldn't be privy to the information that we, the readers, were, that makes for an infinitely more interesting fight. That obviously Boruto would win. However, even if Kawaki does understand that he needs to get rid of Boruto, the fact that Kawaki in Chapter 1 doesn't threaten to kill Boruto, but rather send him to where he sent the 7th Hokage, shows that Kawaki actually has reservations about killing Boruto, which either means he still has love for Boruto or slightly believes the tale that Boruto is telling him that the threat of Momoshiki is now under control. And therefore, this idea that Momoshiki is going to control Boruto's body at some point in the future adds so much needed context for Chapter 1 that it's now beginning to make more sense than it ever has before. And that is awesome. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you believe Chapter 25 has set up the beginning and or ending of Boruto, or do you believe I'm reaching here? Let me know in the comments below. And while I got you down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Oh, Nick, no way they clone Boruto. I don't know. I think it would be cool. Let's get Orochimaru re-involved in the story.